Today, I'm bringing back our good friend, therapist, and author, Chelsey Brooke Cole. We've done a number of collaborations together. There she is. Let me get her on here. And some person. And I love this topic. And what we're going to be talking about today is how to know who is safe to share your abuse story with. So, Chelsey, it's so good to see you again.
Hey, good. I'm good. I'm trying to get my video. They always zoom in so much.
I know.
I thought I was far enough back away, but I know
Yeah.
we've done so many of these. I was just looking through, seeing how many we've done. I don't
Really?
even know at this point.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know. And I was going to say, I'm waiting for the cat.
oh yeah, he's already here. You can see his
Yes,
tail.
that's like your signature is the cat.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Yep.
But
They're both
but
here.
anyway, so thanks for coming back again, and especially I love when your feed when your posts pop up in my feed because there's always something that I'm like, ooh, we should have a
Y-
conversation about that.
I
And so
know. We
that's how, of course, this one started where you had something about this. How do you know something about how do you know who to tell your story to? And I thought, oh, so good. So,
Mhm.
before we even get into the topic and before you introduce yourself, I always think about how abuse thrives in secrecy and how you hear that you need to talk about your experience. What do you think about that?
I think it's tricky. I think that there's a lot of truth to it, but I think it has to be done in a really safe space because I know a lot of times, well, I think at first we're often very scared to talk about it. We don't know where to, we don't know who to trust. Um, and if you tell the wrong person or if you start trying to open up to people who don't understand, then unfortunately, I've seen a lot of times that can do a lot of damage. Then that can kind of pull people back into their circle and like into their shell and like not really want to say anything. And maybe even you kind of end up self gaslighting yourself and you question even more and you doubt what you've been through. So I think this is a really important conversation because survivors need to learn discernment. And I think I
Mm.
see survivors and my clients struggle a lot with that. I know I certainly have as part of my journey. Just after narcissistic abuse, we tend to go from one extreme to the other. Like if we were a people pleaser and we assumed the best of everyone and we didn't really set boundaries, and it's like, okay, trust no one. No one gets in. Like I'm, creating this house of stone, like nobody is gonna know me at all. And so but then we also cut off really good people and we don't let any healthy people in or healthy relationships grow either. So it's really important when we're thinking about how to be healthy after narcissistic abuse or during narcissistic abuse. How do we discern, like, how do we get in that middle ground where yes, we set boundaries, we can kind of weed out the toxic people, but we also leave enough space for those healthy people to come in.
Yeah, yeah. So, Chelsey, why don't you now formally introduce yourself?
Yes, well, we've done several of these together, but my name is Chelsey Brooke Cole. I'm a best-selling author, psychotherapist, and coach specializing in narcissistic abuse, complex trauma, relational trauma. I was one of those kids who knew from a very young age what they wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to be a therapist of some sort and help people. So I started my college career at 16 and graduated with my master's in 22, and I've been specializing in as a therapist ever since. And what really drew me to narcissistic abuse was kind of a combination. I was dealing with a lot of clients who were going through narcissistic abuse, having these relationships that made no sense. They did everything. We tried the communication strategies, we tried the attachment styles, and just tell them how you feel and all the typical couples therapy advice you get. Nothing was working. And in my own personal life, I was going through a lot of tumultuous relationships. I was trying very hard to make things work, but couldn't, and that brought a lot of shame, just because I was a therapist and like why can I not figure this out? And so out of desperation for myself and for my clients, I dove into what could be going on, and that's when I came across narcissism, toxic people, and from that framework everything started to make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the thing. We always talk about that light bulb moment where it's like you're going through something and you feel like this is so crazy and this is just me and
Yep.
you're really isolated. And then you find out what the word is,
Yes.
that special word, which I didn't know either. And then you think there's a name and then you want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so the internet is full of all kinds of information on narcissism. Um, so is there any danger with sharing your experience on social media in particular about narcissistic abuse? Because I know a lot of our clients feel compelled to, because they say, this is my therapy. I need to
Yep.
talk about my experience.
Yep. I get that question a lot because I think a lot of people do want to share. I even have some people reach out that like just say to me, I've been following you and I resonate and I feel like I need to share my story and I don't know where to. Can I just share it with you? And so
Mhm.
actually in preparation for my book, I collected over 400 stories from narcissistic abuse survivors. And I was really kind of surprised at how much people thanked me. And although I was really grateful for people sharing, but they thanked me for giving them a space to put their story, to lay it out and to talk about it. And they knew, what I was going to be doing with it and how I was going to be sharing it. And they trusted me with that. So I think you have to be mindful. I always encourage people that you can talk in generalities, obviously not giving any legal advice. You could probably speak to that better than me, but you can talk about kinds of things that you've been through. You can say what you resonate with. However, do so. I would just caution people to do so at the right time in your healing. If you're very early on, and if somebody comments and says, "What are you talking about? Like this is ridiculous," or "Oh, you're on this narcissism thing," and that's going to crush you. Maybe wait a bit. Kind of share it probably more in those on specific pages that you're going to be safe, or there's even private Facebook groups, things like that. But if you're further along, then I think that you can share. You can even start support groups in your own area and getting involved in like local stuff. I think that could be a really helpful way as well for people to share their story and be able to connect with those who've went through similar things.
Yeah. Okay. So my experience when I first learned the word is I joined a narcissistic abuse. Actually, I joined two in person. And I was shocked to find that there were some very toxic people in both of those groups. One actually happened to be running, actually, two of them were running the groups. And I was astonished. And I kept thinking, is it me? Like, am I just imagining this? And then talking to a couple other people in the group, they were like, no. And so I feel like you have to be extremely careful with some of these groups. And again, this was in-person groups that I went to. But what's your experience with finding that toxic people infiltrate communities like that? Because I feel like it's rampant. It's a problem. Everybody plays victim, so it's hard to tell.
Right. I was going to say, I think especially the vulnerable narcissists would end up there because for grandiose narcissists, they're like, no, I'm above this. Like, I'm not going to tell them. I don't have problems. But the vulnerable narcissist, the one that gains supply through pity, sympathy, getting your attention, getting your unlimited help and support. That's, yeah, I think that we have to be pretty careful with who we talk to about it. And so that's why I think social media itself even provides a good platform for people to start because I'll just say even for myself, like you can't even assume that you can talk to a therapist or you can talk to a mental health professional and they have an understanding of narcissism. I catch myself with that because I'm in a room a lot of times with therapists and you assume it's a safe place. And sometimes people find out that I'm a narcissistic abuse expert and they're like, oh, that's amazing. You're doing great work. And other people kind of side eye me like, are you really like talking about this? Isn't that just an overinflated word? So I kind of test the waters a lot of times. I might share something, for example, like with a therapist or in a group and kind of get feedback initially and feel things out and see where everybody is at. So if you ever walk into a group and you wonder, okay, is this safe? I'm, as an introvert, just more of an observer anyways, but I think that can really be a good way to start to discern is like throw out some words like narcissism and gaslighting. Hear people, hear what their definition is of it, what their experiences have been with it, and then really start to see what you find there and trust your gut. That's something we can talk about more, but that is a really important piece because survivors have been taught to cut off from their gut, to cut off from those kind of sensations you get like something isn't right here, that can actually help you a lot in determining who's safe and who's not.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you highlighted the fact that just because someone is a therapist doesn't mean that they're an expert in emotional abuse. And we've heard horror stories. I myself have been through, I've experienced a couple of horror stories with therapists that were not trauma informed,
Yeah.
that didn't understand, that made things worse, that made things so bad for some of our clients, where they went in because someone advertised as a narcissistic abuse specialist, and then
Yeah.
they were like blamed and questioned, when to me it seemed really apparent, like how could somebody not understand the dynamics of domestic
Yeah.
violence, not
Yeah.
just narcissism, but domestic violence and emotional abuse.
Right. I even tell people, like, interview your therapist, interview anybody before you're going to work with them, an individual therapist, a couples therapist, because you do a quick search on Psychology Today now, and there's a lot of narcissistic abuse experts that come up. And unfortunately, with anything that kind of gains a lot of attention and a lot of ground, you're going to have people who just hop on the bandwagon and like, yeah, I could specialize in narcissistic abuse. But if you talk to them for any length of time, then you'll be able to weed out like those who really get it and those who don't. Um, so I often encourage people to interview their therapist and say, well, what do you mean by a trauma-informed approach? And how do you typically help people? And how many people have you worked with? I've spent thousands of hours doing this at this point, and people can see my posts, and I'm very like open about this is kind of my approach, and you can get a feel for what I do just on my page. So if somebody has something like that where you can look at, definitely do that. And again, trust your gut. I don't care if they seem like the best expert in the world and you're so impressed with all of their accolades and achievements and degrees. If you don't feel just really understood and really safe with them on that initial interview call, find somebody else.
Yeah, yeah. I want to go back to what you said about posting online.
Mm-hmm.
So, Chris and I are not attorneys, but we specialize in legal abuse. And so we're paying close attention to getting someone through the legal process when they are separating from a toxic personality. And
Mm-hmm.
so one of the things that lawyers have always advised us is that when you have an open case, you should never post
Yeah.
details of your case on social media, because opposing counsel is combing
Yes.
all of your feeds to find something, especially if you have
Yeah.
children. And don't think that just because you are not friends with your kids on social media, that
Yeah.
doesn't matter, because what happens is generally judges tend to look at it as your children's friends' parents could be seeing those posts, and that could trickle down and get back to your children. And so you do have to be really, really careful about posting certain types of information on your social media. So I would caution just
Yeah.
putting it all out there. We often have to battle with our clients. We're like, but I need to. I'm like, you really can't. You're really putting yourself in harm's way, because you're opening up the door for all kinds of attacks from the other side, and you don't ever want a judge to dislike you from the beginning of a case.
Right. I know it is really hard, but that's especially true, especially if you're going through a divorce, particularly if you have kids and co-parenting. They're absolutely watching it because narcissists are also notorious for making fake accounts. I've been told, and I know about so many who they're like, you would be amazed at how many this narcissist has of fake accounts. This coming from like other people who know them and have seen their social media accounts. Like it's insane. And so narcissists themselves and their enablers and their flying monkeys, these people who are supporting their narrative are watching your page. So you do have to be cautious. And I don't know that social media is even the best place to really share your story, because I think part of the power of sharing your story is really being heard and seen and validated.
Mm.
And how many of us really get that deeply from a social media post rather than being in a group or being one-on-one? I think you can get validation from reading like mine or like yours, or pages like ours where you have that narcissistic abuse education that can feel really validating. But as with everything in social media, when you post it out there, it's also open to possible criticism, people who just may not understand and may make a flippant comment that really rubs you the wrong way or isn't trauma informed. And so just really protect yourself.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit also about when you meet someone for the first time.
Yes.
Let's say you come out of this toxic relationship, and you're just starting to date. What
Yeah.
should you consider? as you're starting this new chapter of your life.
Yeah. A lot of my clients are in this situation, and it's something we talk about. Like, how do you discern when you start dating? Because, like I said, we often go from 0 to 100. We're like totally open and caring and assuming the best to assuming everyone is a narcissist.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, both of those are not good places to be. Because if you assume everyone is a narcissist, not only do you kind of see things that aren't really there, but then you can miss and cut off the healthy people. And so it's, first of all, really taking a we'll see approach,
Mm-hmm.
trusting yourself and giving yourself enough time and space to see those patterns. Because that's really what narcissistic abuse is about. And that's what narcissism is. It's a personality trait that exhibits predictable patterns of behavior over time. I can't meet someone and tell you immediately, are they a narcissist or not? I can tell you, are they arrogant? Did they come off entitled? Were they a little emotionally dysregulated? Sure. But have I seen the whole pattern? No. So you have to give yourself that time and trust yourself that over a span, you will be able to see those patterns.
Yeah.
The second thing I would encourage people to do is really tune into your body and ask you, just be really mindful of these questions. Questions like, how safe do I feel being my authentic self with this person? How comfortable do I feel and safe? How comfortable and safe do I feel setting boundaries with this person, or disagreeing, or saying no, and really paying attention to how they react?
Yeah.
If you have to change a date, if you were going to go out, but then you had a work event you had to go to, if your kids got sick and you ended up not being able to go, how does that other person react when you have to set a boundary or when you don't do exactly what they want you to do? That can also tell you a lot, because a lot of times that's when we really start to see the narcissistic patterns come out.
Yeah, that's I remember doing content like years ago and making a little video about how to tell pretty quickly if someone's got an issue, and it's like set a boundary.
Yeah.
Just say no to something
Yeah.
and without explanation and see what they do.
Yeah.
And sometimes even if they're trying to be sweet, but they're still disagreeing. Like, for example, I think Chris and I were talking about, like, say, oh, I don't feel good. Like, I'm not going to be able to see you tonight because I don't feel good. But I'll see you tomorrow instead. And if they're like, no, but let me bring you stuff. And you're like, no, that's fine. Like,
Yes.
I'll just see you tomorrow. And they still keep pushing, even though it might sound like they're being really kind. They're still not respecting you saying, no, like, I will see you later.
Right. Yep.
Instead of second guessing and being like, well, but they're trying to be so kind. Like, no, they're not respecting the fact that you said no.
Right. And in healthy relationships, you can set boundaries. You can agree to disagree. They are not trying to own reality. They're not trying to own you. They're not trying to manipulate or exploit or push into your thoughts and feelings. They actually want to know you, and they want to respect what they get to know. So that is a really good way to see that shift, is like, do they actually accept my no as a no? Or do they even try to convince me otherwise? Even if it seems, like you said, sweet or endearing, the reality is they're not respecting your boundary.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to something I might have read years ago about how also sometimes we tend to be more vulnerable targets than others. For example, after a divorce or after the death of someone that we care about, or moving to a new location. And that sometimes when you meet someone for the first time, if you share too much about your story and you just think, oh, this is just like a regular person, you might be dealing with someone who is mining that information, thinking, oh, this is like the perfect time to get in. Have you heard of something like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure.
I even write about that in my book. Like, when I'm talking people through, be curious about why you got into this relationship. For some of us, we did grow up in dysfunctional households, or we can kind of make those trails and those patterns back to, oh, well, it was partly my childhood, things I grew up with, and patterns that I had become accustomed to. For some people, they just don't know what they don't know. And if this is a first narcissistic relationship that you've had, then I ask those specific questions, like, were you moving? Where did you just get divorced? Did you lose someone? Did you just lose your job? Was there a reason that you were feeling kind of off, or not quite as grounded, were you new to an area? Like all of those things can give you some clues as to why you might be just a little bit more susceptible, or maybe put up with some things that you wouldn't otherwise because you're in that transition phase of life.
Yeah. Yeah. So are there other ways that you can tell if someone is unsafe, like
Hmm.
where you should really just be like, I'm not, besides trusting your gut and being like that in those vulnerable periods of time?
Yeah. Well, I know we touched on enablers and flying monkeys, and just to give everyone a context of what that is. So, enablers can be passive or active. Active enablers are those flying monkeys, the people who are actively going around supporting the narcissist narrative. And then there's just passive enablers. There's people who maybe they just don't want to deal with it.
Mhm.
They don't really want to see someone that you're talking about in a negative light. So a lot of times, what's really hard for people is that you may have to set some boundaries with people who are otherwise healthy,
Mm.
but because of what they think of the narcissist, we often see this like in families or in friendships or even in work environments. You may not be able to fully open up or talk to them about your narcissistic abuse experiences because they may just push back on it. They may not want to hear it. They may not want to view that person that way, or they may say something like, well, I've never had a problem with them, or they've never treated me like that, or couldn't you make it work? Are you sure? They really didn't. That doesn't sound like them. I'm sure that you could work it out. So you get this pushback of
Mhm.
like, they're not completely denying your reality. They may even say, well, that may be true for you, but I don't know that that's who they really are.
But it feels so disloyal. Like that's so
Yeah,
hurtful. Like I,
it's
I think
awful.
about when I first split up from my ex, how one of my, who I thought was like a really close friend, one of the first things she said was, "Oh, we're never going to see him again to play cards together." And I was like, "Did you just hear what I
Uh,
said? Like, how did you say such a thing?"
right.
So
Oh, it feels
insensitive.
awful.
I
Yeah. Yeah, it feels absolutely awful. I still deal with this with narcissists. Their flying monkeys have kind of moved to my hometown, and so I don't even totally feel comfortable going there anymore, or going to certain stores and certain places. And not because I really even have a problem with them, but it's because of what they have been told by the narcissist and how they're going to support their narrative no matter what. And so now those people are just not safe people for me anymore.
Yeah. So this is making me think of something that just came up this past weekend in our legal abuse support group. So we have, we mix our men and women together in
Hmm.
the support group, and I think it's really important that we do that, especially because um, they learn each other's perspective and they develop deep empathy for each other.
Yeah.
And when with protected parents, like everybody wants the same thing. So and I recognize the difference with other things, but anyway. So in our group, there was a situation where um, uh, a father's. So there's a couple of kids, and one of the girls, one of the daughters, made friends with someone at an extracurricular activity, and so the friend's parent gave the child their contact number, and so the kid's dad, our client, was like, "Oh, I guess I'll make a play date for our kids to play together." But then the ex, the toxic one, like jumped in and started making plans ahead of time. And so our client was like, I don't even feel comfortable.
Mm.
Like, is it creepy or like because I'm a guy? I'm like, no. So we we're all like, no, it's not. But it wasn't about the gender thing. It was more about that the toxic person got to the
Yeah.
new friend first. And our
Yeah.
client was worried that, the ex was probably saying all kinds of terrible things.
Mm.
Um, do you have any advice for someone in that situation where we don't know if the ex is still talking about them? We imagine that they are, but they just feel like this is my kid's friend's parent. And
Yeah.
I just want my kids to have friends, but how am I going to make plans for my kid to have like a play date on my time if I feel like my ex keeps getting to everyone first?
Right. Oh, so relatable. Thinking of so many clients and survivor
Right.
stories that I've heard. I think what's really important here is the same kind of advice that I give people to survive the smear campaign, which is that the most powerful thing you can do is prove who you are. The narcissist can say things, they can talk about your relationship, they can say things that you've done. How long is that going to last? Like initially, sure, someone might be like, oh man, and have this perspective of you. But over the weeks, over the months that your child develops a friendship with them, over maybe the years that you run into this person, and you consistently are kind and regulated and caring and empathetic and self-reflective and all the things that you are, how long is that narrative really going to be believable? And at what point is someone going to say, well, they do seem really nice, and every time I talk to them, they've been fine, and this other ex here just won't seem to leave them alone, like it's constantly talking bad about them, because likely that's what narcissistic exes do. Like, it's months, years, or decades down the road, and they're telling you the same sad sob story about the non-narcissistic person. So the most powerful thing you can do is be who you are and show that with actions over time.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking, this person and the ex have been divorced for years. So maybe if the ex starts in with that right away, hopefully a normal person be like, why are they still talking to him? I mean, didn't they separate like years ago? Like, why is this still going on? Like, that's the main topic of conversation.
Yep, it always is. Yes, narcissists always have someone who's done them wrong, something that didn't go their way, someone to blame, and they are most threatened by those who know the most about them. So that's often why exes and co-parents and family members and stuff like that, they devalue the most, because you know them the best.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so on the flip side, how do we know if someone is safe? Besides, like, I always think of, okay, trusting your gut, but sometimes it's not always perfect either.
Yeah. Well, certainly you do want to pay attention to your gut. There's something called neuroception, which is the nervous system's automatic scanning for cues of safety or danger in an environment. So there's a physiological reason that some environments and some people feel safe and some do not. So it's not just something that's in your head or something that we hear about that has no basis. Like, there's a physiological reason for that. So with safe people, you really feel clear, calm, and collected. You don't feel super confused and chaotic. You really feel like they're listening to you and they accept your point of view. Going back to something that we talked about earlier, they don't argue with your point of view. They don't say, well, I'm sorry that you had that experience with that person, or kind of make you feel dismissed or devalued. They don't try to change your point of view either. They don't say things like, well, are you really sure that they didn't mean it like this? And it sounds just like a misunderstanding. I mean, me and my husband or whatever, we've had those discussions and it turned out great. You should just tell them how you feel. So safe people are not trying to, give you solutions and make you change your mind and dismiss how you feel. They really help you feel grounded and safe. And I think the most of all, they remind you of who you really are. Like, you feel like your authentic self with them. You feel almost like you can just breathe when you're around them. And I'm just thinking of some close friends and trusted people. You feel like you let your guard down when you're around them. Like, you can just be present and you don't feel like you have to be anyone. You don't feel like you have to do anything. You're just you. And it like gives you a glimpse and a reminder of, yeah, I do remember feeling like this, or I feel so much more calmer and so much more clear when I'm around this person. So those are the things to pay attention to.
Well, Chelsey, having met you in real life, I thought you were exactly what you described. It was amazing. Like, I remember when we had dinner, I just opened up to you about things. I was like, hardly anyone knows this.
Exactly.
So that was really incredible.
Yes.
But there's a word that I learned recently that's more of a therapy word called transference. And I was talking to a therapist about, somebody had said, how can you tell when someone you're talking to is not someone you want to work with? And I was like, I don't know. Sometimes I just get this feeling, like I don't really care. Like when they're crying, like something inside of me is like, this doesn't feel authentic. And so whoever I was talking to was saying that word is called transference, because our normal human nature is to feel empathy for other people. So if somebody is telling you something and you just feel like, I don't care, that they are probably not being honest. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's something we don't often think about, but if somebody's reminding you of somebody, that is really something to pay attention to. And like, what is it about that person that reminds you of someone else, and like in your body? And then what are other times that you have felt that way, and try to make those connections. Because sometimes we can be really confused, like, why am I having this reaction to this person? I
Yeah.
haven't done anything, but for a reason I'm getting this sense. And I often tell people it's not about exactly what they're doing, it's how they make you feel.
Mm-hmm.
So reflect on that, and then other times that you might have felt that way, and other people that you felt that way around.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, Chelsey, any other last bits, or otherwise, how can people find you
Yes.
and your
Well,
book?
if you enjoyed this conversation and you want to dive deeper into neuroception and not just understanding narcissists, but really how to heal and set those healthy boundaries, you can get my book, If Only I'd Known, at Amazon or anywhere books are sold. Follow either of us on social media. We post a lot about narcissistic abuse, and I'm opening up some group programs starting early next year. So be on the lookout for that as well.
Great. All right, Chelsey. Well, thanks for coming back, and I'm sure
Thank
we're going to do
you.
this again and again and
I
again.
know. We will. Thanks so much.
All right. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.